Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show, it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Walker. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we're immediately picking up after the events of last episode. Obviously, things could have gone a lot worse if it wasn't for Trey. Luckily, Trey was able to get to James in time, even pop off a few shots to get the shooter to run away. Luckily, backup arrived. We got introduced to a trooper who just goes by Jack, and I think it's going to be interesting. The way they introduced her this episode definitely seems like I feel like they're setting her up to be kind of like potentially Mickey's replacement, because like Walker is going to need a new partner soon enough, especially with whatever everything that this episode set up. But I think that's definitely going to be interesting. But like the fact is they introduced her, like I feel like that seems like it's going to be the case. But obviously, things would have been a lot worse for James if it wasn't for Trey. So now it is a situation, everyone finding out about it, you know, Walker, his dad, Liam, Stella and August are there, along with DJ, James' son, as well as his ex, Kelly, are all there to check on. Look, like I said, once again, everything worked out. He's okay, but obviously it's about tracking down a shooter. And so while he's indisposed, James is putting everything on Walker. He's the one dishing out the orders, but it's also a thing of he doesn't want anyone to be judge, jury, and executioner. He wants it to be a situation that this gets handled by the book. And so it's up to Walker, which for him, he finds himself struggling in this episode, balancing it all, trying to fill those shoes because he can't do what James does. And so he finds himself like, because Walker always works best when he has somebody by his side, and it's just like, it's just been one thing after another. It's just like, you know, James is indisposed right now. He lost Mickey, and he doesn't have anyone that can kind of balance him out, to keep him on the right footing, so he feels a little kind of off balance this episode, especially considering he has to fill James' role, even to the point that I wasn't expecting him to go see who he ended up going to see, and it ended up being Stan. I was like, oh, who are you going to see? I don't know why it didn't immediately cross my mind. Oh, of course you would go to Stan. He's still like a connective tissue piece in all of this that's kind of been, you know, he's sitting in the you know, he's still in that limbo space currently, so. Which obviously James later on didn't think it was smart for Walker to go to him, but it's like, right, he is not only like, despite our issues with him, like, I mean, I have plenty of issues, he is the reason why Emily's dead, but it's also, you know, all the corruption and him working with Northside Nation, but it's also like, right, he is someone who knows about Serrano, so he ends up pointing out to Walker, whoever is responsible for this can't be Serrano. You know, you saw what Serrano did. He put a big target. He got a professional to come after you. And the fact is, if this was James, like, especially because Serrano's in a winning position right now, because of Liam's situation, because of what Liam did, now, like, Serrano's going to be able to walk on everything. So, like, why jeopardize that by, like, setting up a hit after? It's like, if I was going to go after James for whatever reason, it would have been, like, a professional. So, this was kind of sloppy. This wasn't, I mean, because whoever it was, obviously, Walker lucked out and the sniper missed in the end. I mean, granted, we now know who that sniper was. We know it was Garrett. But this would have been like a much better hit than it was if it was like, if going after James was this. So now Stan had suggested looking into James, that whoever came after him, it might have been a personal situation, and he does look into it. Like, they're looking into all the old cases from James, like people who might hold a vendetta against him, and ultimately they end up finding out what was the guy's name? Was it Caleb or was it something else? I'm blanking on the guy who was actually responsible. He ended up at a hospital afterwards, because Liam ended up talking to someone. We later on find out it was Stan, and ended up kind of getting pointed in the right direction. This all stemmed because years ago, James arrested him. It was like a traffic thing or whatever. For whatever reason, they arrested him, but it ended up turning into a bigger thing. And the system, like, basically, for whatever reason, I guess they wanted to make an example out of him. Like, things, like, obviously, I forgot what it was that he actually did. He did, I think, what he said was, like, a broken taillight is what led to ruining his life, is what he's explaining to James later. Is that basically, he got locked up for, like, 3 months. Like, he was getting locked up because the judge or whatever decided, because James went to him about leniency to the judge, but the judge didn't end up giving him leniency because it was out of James's hands, and they ended up going pretty hard on him. And the guy got locked up for after about 3 months, he ended up killing someone, defending himself, and got 15 years for manslaughter. So he blames James for like, you ruined my life. Like, you promised me that things were going to be okay, that it wasn't going to be that serious, but because of you. And this situation is what let James go like, no, I can't just be someone who takes orders. I got to be someone in a high enough position that I can dictate how things play out. That's why he was so adamant about with Walker about like, right, we're going to follow things by the book. Like, yes, Walker skews the line sometimes a lot more to his comfort, but it's like, it's just people who are higher up, and he's seen that time and time again recently with people higher up in positions manipulating and doing a lot of bad, and obviously that doesn't sit well with James because he wants to be in a higher enough position that he can make the calls to do stuff like right, because if it was his call, he would have done things differently. And it's just like that one situation, that call that was outside of his hands, that he made a promise like, oh, I'll be lenient to try and get you help, and it ended up backfiring. The guy was put in a very complicated situation, like he wanted revenge. And the entire time, like, James is trying to talk the guy down. He's like, I get it, you're angry, you have every right to be, but let's put the guns down. He's even telling Walker to put the guns down. It's like, right, we can all walk away from this. Nobody has to die. Sadly, he still dies in the end because he didn't even have the gun pointed at, didn't even have his gun pointed at James. It was just kind of like a, hey, like, you know, the guy, it was kind of like a, I don't know if it was necessarily like a SWAT team, but it was like a armed up team that ended up taking him down. And the guy's just like, I was just doing my job. I guess like their job is like, you see a suspect with a gun, you shoot to kill, like you don't hesitate. Because the thing is, Walker had his gun on a guy, but I guess it's like, right, my job is just to take that shot, and he took it. And it's just like, it's heartbreaking that it turned out this way. It's like, it didn't have to be this way. Like, yes, it doesn't justify what he did, but the dude was angry, and he was just lashing out, and it's just like, the guy's a symptom of what James has tried so hard to fight against, you know? And so I just thought that was kind of heartbreaking in the end. And I think this whole situation ended up putting James, giving him like a different perspective on things. I mean, for one, him and Kelly talking, he talks about the fact is that him and Kelly haven't really had a conversation for like a year. He's like, we never would have thought we'd be where we are right now, divorced and everything. And he was under the impression it's because he was married to his job. But she's like, no, that's not actually even it. Like, the fact is, you weren't always on this path, but the moment you start going down the captain path is when things kind of change. That the fact is, you even stopped coming home, in at least coming home in a way that mattered. You weren't present because you were so focused on work. It's because what he had brought up earlier, he wanted to make changes, so he dedicated so much to becoming captain that everything else kind of fell to the wayside to some extent. But by becoming captain, he figured he could make a lot more changes, and because he's trying to do so much, like I said, his personal life kind of fell to the wayside. Especially now, because he had talked about it early on that he had found a replacement. I was like, it was going to be Mickey. Mickey was going to be a replacement. And yeah, because everything that Mickey was, he needed someone like that in the captain's seat. But now that she's gone, he's kind of thrown in the air on like who he wants to be taking over. And I'm like, you would think Walker, but I think even he knew then that Walker wasn't 100% ready. At least Walker in the past, maybe Walker as he is now is, but even Walker's like, no, I'm not that type of person who wants to fill those shoes. I can't do that job. I can't do what you do, but I can do the person who can take those orders. And, you know, like, obviously he kind of ignores James' orders sometimes, but it is like, right, I'm that person that will call the shots because I know what you give an order. I know and understand who you are, and now having a better understanding of the position you're in and what it means to fill those shoes. Like, it's just a mutual understanding that they've reached that, right, because James realized talking to Kelly that this job isn't just one person or two people, because it's about changing, not just like, because being at the top isn't enough anymore. Like, you need to trickle that out to affect dozens upon, it won't even affect not even just a dozen cops. It needs to affect the whole system as a whole, but you can't do that just as one or two person. But at the very least, this is a start. Him and Walker being on the same page of like, yes, us working even closer together. I figure things out. You kind of handle things more so on the orders, and you kind of dish that out. And, you know, we start by training and recruiting, and we wash, rinse, and repeat over and over again until we bulk this out, until basically this unit, like the police, is filled with people like Mickey. even a few more Cordels, because having someone who will kind of trust their own instincts to do things, yes, he can be a wild cowboy, but sometimes those gut instincts to not just follow like what is protocol is sometimes necessary. So, he's like a few Cordels, not a lot. A few is what we can handle, but it led an interesting conversation between him and Kelly, which I wonder, is there going to be a rekindling of that? Because we have seen, obviously, this season, like, he's tried to do a little dating, but it didn't work out, mainly because of Cordell ended up convincing her to go, he ended up telling his story about Emily and everything, kind of convinced her to go and rekindle things with her ex, that whole thing, so. But part of me was wondering, this episode seemed like it was set up for rekindling things between James and his ex. The thing I thought was kind of interesting, though, was I was expecting at the end of this episode, James was like, no, I am going to take a break. Obviously, like, he's talking about it with his son. Like, DJ's like, oh, maybe we kind of do, like, a little weekend thing together. He's like, yeah, I think that is good. Like, kind of get away from all of this. I thought James, at the end of this, would kind of step down, or at least be in the process of stepping down, but there's too much work to be done. We got to, once again, find other Mickeys to kind of fill out the ranks, and I think eventually he'll get to the point where he'll feel comfortable enough to step down. Now, whether that's going to be at the end of the season, I don't know if that'll be the case, but I think it is something that he's going to be working towards more so now after this. Once again, this whole episode kind of put things in perspective for a lot of people. Even Trey, because obviously Trey's been a little off kilter since the Mickey thing, and I thought was, obviously Bonham was like, yo, I'm sorry for it, that was not my place. He was like, no, the Garrett thing was just like the tip of the iceberg. Like, loving someone isn't always enough, that there has to be other things. Like, there was already underlining issues, and just, that Garrett just kind of pointed out some of those issues, but obviously for Trey, he realized kind of, what he wants and what he doesn't want for his life. Like, being in these situations, I think being where he is right now made him realize, like, right, my life is kind of in a position where I'm good where I'm at. So I guess, like, he's going to continue, like, obviously teaching at the school and stuff like that. But, like, being this situation with James again made him realize, like, I don't want to go back to being in kind of, like, that medical life like that. It's like, I left that for a reason. And even Bonham talked about, like, right, like, after he came back from service, he felt like he was living a different life until he met Abby. And for him, it's like, yes, there has been a lot of good and bad, but if the ups and downs have basically made him and his life what it is, so, everything kind of happens for a reason. And I did thought it was a beautiful sentiment where he ends up giving Trey, like, it's like, yeah, like, the ranch has been a crime scene a few times, but not as much as your place, but it's like, here, if you ever need a place, like, you're always welcome to, like, at the ranch, because, like, right, it's your home. And that's what I thought was interesting, because the conversation came up between Abilene and Bonham before about who would take over the ranch. And Walker and Liam kind of both seemed they had no interest. Now the question is Stella and August. But part of me was like, not less it ends up becoming Trey who ends up taking care of it. But, I don't know. That seemed like that was kind of something I was thinking for a while. But we'll see if that ends up being the case. But obviously there was a little bit of a moment between Jerry and Walker where she kind of helped him figure things out about how, right, you thrive in the chaos, like, despite everything that's happened, Emily, now this with James, even Mickey leaving, like, you've always found a way to manage through the chaos. Like, all you have to do is kind of continue handling, all you can do is just kind of be you and handle things the way you would, and you'll get this done. And so it was kind of that nice little moment, but, like, once again, just kind of slowly threading that more and more, because obviously where we left off between Jerry and Walker, there was kind of a no-go on that. Doesn't mean that's always going to be the case. I hope there is something that happens between them, because I think I don't know, you've wanted it for a while, something to happen between them, and I hope it does end up happening. But, I also thought was kind of a nice moment between August, Stella, and DJ, where they kind of reminisced about the past. Because it's like, right, do we ever wish that our dads were not the cops? And initially, August is like, yeah, I used to feel that way. But now he's also like, right, but I can't imagine Dad doing anything else. And DJ gets it too, but it's like, right, like the good that comes from them being in their position. But he also wonders sometimes, he wishes, like, they could put life on pause. Because even Kelly talked about, right, they've been in a situation where it's like little minor things have kind of ended up in hospitals, but never like to this extent. She'd even said, like, right, how about next time you call me and it's not in a situation where the sky is falling? But that little game that they had come up with, because they found their parents playing games and they were sneaking just to learn how to play it, and they came up with their own. And I love that thing of Stella saying, like, right, I can't put things on pause for right now, but I can make you kind of like, we can focus on something else at least for a little bit. I thought that was kind of a nice moment between all of them, like that little card game they came up with on their own. So I thought that was kind of neat. But speaking of Walker in that position of kind of being active captain kind of for that little bit of time, I did like that speech that he gave in front of everyone. He's like, honestly, I'm nervous. I'm actually downright scared, and I'm sure some of you are scared too. The fact of the matter is, this is going to be kind of hard for me to fill these shoes, but together we can do this. Like, if you ever need any point you're feeling lost, think, what would James do? And that would kind of lead us to handle this get justice in a moral way that James would. So he was kind of able to take charge, and that's when Liam reached out and ended up talking to Stan, which Stan ends up dropping some interesting info this episode. He ends up pointing out the Davidsons never sat right with him, especially Gail. He was saying especially the way he was like, sometimes I was thinking maybe it was just because the way she was so nasty to Abby, but then he did kind of implies like there's more, and I'm like, okay, so it's like, that's why I was like, there's certain things about Gail that didn't sit right with me, but he talks about there's something more to it, because he talks about the fact is during the fire, whatever it is, he's saying it happened even before Marv died. There was something kind of off about the Davidsons, and so he's saying that he handled stuff after the fire, kind of the more boring side of things, and you're like, no, what the hell is that about? Because part of me was almost like, you don't think they're going to be implying, for example, that Liam's not actually a Walker, that he's actually a Davidson or something like that. I don't think that's going to be the case, but I'm like, I don't know. I just got the inkling it's going to be some big reveal or whatever. Whatever it is, Stan's got some dirt that he's like, no, go to you'll find this info. He's like, what will I find? You'll know it when you find it, but also know that sometimes you go digging like this, you're going to find some stuff you don't like. So I guess it's going to, whatever it is, it must not paint the Walker family in the best light. So it must be some secrets of just the lineage that is the Walkers. Like maybe this kind of dates back to the some of their older ancestors, but it also contains something between Bonham and Abby with whatever went down all those years ago. Because part of me at the time was wondering, and, I am curious if it was actually, because Liam was a kid at the time, so could it be that he was actually responsible for the fire, but Cordell kind of got a lot of the blame for it. So I'm wondering if there's something on that department, it's like, right, you're not going to want these answers because they're all going to point to you being responsible. Once again, he was a young kid at the time, so maybe he made a mistake, and the trauma of it all, he blocked it out. Walker doesn't even remember everything at the time, too, because the trauma did that as well. But whatever it is, whatever truth that Bonham and Abilene are hiding, it has to be for the purposes of protecting their family. So, I don't know. Once again, we know that Daniel kind of went and done some shady stuff, with the whole Serrano thing, Serrano's people. But I'm still thinking, Gail had to give him the say-so on a lot of what she's done, because she's also been super passive-aggressive, and while, it's like Daniel's up to something, and Gail wanted Walker and Liam to kind of keep that hush-hush, and I was like, there's something there, it's not, she was making it sound like he was having an affair or something, which seems like it might have been the case, but it seemed like she was also hiding what they were really doing there, so I felt for a while there was definitely something off about Gail, but this seems like to imply that. It's just interesting that that's coming from Stan. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see what info he's got and what this what ends up surfacing from the past, because there's still so many questions on that front. But I'm interested to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.